Hey guys, in this segment I'm going to show you my technique in how I lay paint. Pay close attention to how I hold my gun, the distance from the panel, the pressure that I'm using, I'll go through that, my gun stroke and my overlap. There are some fundamental things that you need to know when painting a car to ensure that you're going to get an even full finish that is covered. So they're the main things: paint application with your gun stroke, your overlap, so generally it's 50-50 overlap. Sometimes I even like to draw my gun a little bit further back and overlap a little bit less, just to get a little bit more on the panel. But you'll see as I'm doing it, generally I'm going at a 50-50 overlap, sometimes just a little bit back, and you're going to see how that goes on as close as I can show you with the camera. So yeah, speed, distance, fluid, overlap, and there's really, other than that, if you can get a good consistency with your speed. So I think the good thing to try to think about is be robotic. When cars are painted from factory, they're done with robots and they're set to precision viscosities and microns, and if you try to behave like that robot in your stroke, then you're going to essentially put something down that's quite even. So getting that correct overlap, that speed and distance from the panel in a robotic form is going to produce something of decent quality. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the fundamentals of keeping a dust-free job. I mean, you always get a little bit of dust, but I can show you ways to reduce that and how I reduce that. So first of all, it's important to give the floor a really good sweep up and vacuum. I also take my blower and I blow down all the walls and shelves in here just to loosen up and get rid of any dust that might be able to be picked up from the draft of the booth or the draft of my spray gun. So a good sweep and a vacuum. Second of all, I blow myself down. So I put my suit on, I give it a good shake, and I get my blower and I blow myself completely down, even my mask. Dust particles, they get caught in these things, and you're leaning over the panels, and yeah, it only takes a little draft to knock a bit loose and land on your job. So blow your mask down. Absolutely everything. Once you've done with blowing everything down and you've gotten rid of that dust off yourself and around the booth, then you can move to blowing down and getting the dust off your panels before wax and greasing them. I wax and grease last because I want to make sure everything is completely dust free before I actually do the final wax and grease and tack rag. So we're going to do that next. I almost forgot, I always even just wipe my airline down. From the top, just wipe it down as far as you can reach with one arm, and that just gets any particles off that part of the airline, because you hold it up when you're painting, right? So a little bit of particle on your airline can even fall onto your job and ruin it. So good idea, wipe that guy down as well. But what you can also do is, just before you paint, is a sprinkle of water down on the floor. Now this isn't a wet booth, so I don't like to put too much water in here because it can create humidity. But just a sprinkle down, just that way, if there is any dust that's floating around, it'll sit on the floor and your overspray will fall down and stick to that water, and it won't want to fly back up and get under the panels and anywhere you don't want it. So a little sprinkle of water goes a long way. When I'm waxing and greasing, I like to spray the panel and soak it up. It draws any dust and contaminants to the surface. It's lifting that as we speak, and then I'm going to be able to wipe it all off and ensure that it's completely decontaminated. I just like to do half a bonnet at a time. It's a very large panel, and I can focus on really wiping that nice and clean and dry properly before moving to the other side. You can actually see all the little particles rise to the surface. Such an important part of automotive finishing. It's preparation and cleanliness of the panels before the paint goes down. Also, I think it's really important to wear gloves. You get a lot of oils in your skin and you don't want them contaminating your panel. So as soon as you pick that panel up, whether you're moving it from outside into the booth and you don't have your gloves on, sometimes even though you wax and grease it, those oils can stay in there and down the track can cause you problems in your resto job. And you'll see a little fingerprint come back or a little defect there, and a lot of the times it's from handling the panel. So wear gloves, and that way you're going to make sure you don't have any oil issues coming out of your skin onto the panel. All right, so now all the panels are waxed and greased and wiped over clean. I'm going to now give it a tack rag. I'm going to use this type of tack rag. It's just got a little bit of mild tack to it, and I'm going to blow air across the panel and underneath the tack rag as I'm tacking it off. Alright, so all tacked off. You might be wondering why I've got my doors hanging upside down. Look, I usually have them hanging in the manner that they sit on the car. It's how I like to paint the panels. It's how they sit, so paint them that way. However, these ones, there's nowhere to hang my hooks in the door frames. If I spin them around and put my hooks there, they're going to obstruct the panel. So there's no little holes I can run wire through or anything through those frames. So I've just decided to hang them upside down. I can hook the hooks in through the back of the door there, and there's going to be no obstructions to the panel. I'm going for that nice flow glass finish anyway, so the paint will flow the opposite direction, but it'll still look the same on the panel. I've done it before and I've never had any issues. So upside down for this one, but only because of the hook problem. Okay, so to help you understand a little bit more about the overlapping process, I'd like you to think of this pencil as the diameter of my fan, meaning the fan is going to be basically hitting the panel in that area there. And by 50% overlap, I mean, I'm going to start my first stroke with half of that diameter of fan off the panel and half on the panel like that. And I'm going to run my stroke across. And then when I come back, I'm going to do a full one, which is starting from the edge of the panel right up to there. And that's going to be generally a 50% overlap. So you're going from there to there. You're creating a 50% overlap consistently all the way along the panel. So that's what I'm going to go for here. You'll see that as I start to paint, and once I've got a few coats on there, that should be quite even and very minimal gun lines or gun strokes that you'll be able to see. But being a champagne colour, I always do a pattern coat. Spray guns aren't perfect, you know, like I said, they're not machines, they're a hand tool. And by doing pattern coats at the end, you're going to eliminate any kind of little gun tracks, as we call them. So I'm not going to probably get anything too visible by doing this process, but it's just to basically guarantee that they're not going to be seen at the end of the job. And the paint I'm using is Protect Paraglaze. It is a PPG product. I'd say a mid to high range product. I like to use Protect because it lays down really well, it has great coverage, and I mean, value for money, it's really not that far off their best. So I think Protect's a really good system to run. I run it here in my shop and do just about all my jobs with it. I've got the base coat system and the solid system there down the bottom. And I'm going to thin that down with Protect Reducer Standard. It is a 1-to-1 thinning ratio. However, I like to leave anywhere between 15 to 20% of the thinner out, just to give it a little bit more build, a little bit more body. Some colours, when thinned 1-to-1, can take a little bit more to get the coverage So I just leave a little bit of thinner out, and then the coverage comes a lot quicker. So there it is. We'll pour that in to my mixing cup at 1:1. So I'll go to the 5. And then the next 5 at the top of that 1:1 is where the data sheet says to go, but I'm not going to go all the way there. So it's probably about 15% left out of that. It's going to give it a nice coverage. You can see it's not transparent on the stick. It's nice and runny. It's going to cover well. I'm just going to pour it straight into the PPS pot. The lids have an inbuilt strainer in them, so you don't need to strain them. If you want to strain them into that pot, that's fine, just if you want to guarantee it, but these are very, very fine strainers inbuilt into that lid, so I've never had an issue with just pouring it straight into the pot. It catches just about everything. All right, so I'm about to lay the paint. I've got my gun set at about 2 bars. See there? I've got my fluid wound out, not all the way, probably about 3/4 of the way. So you can see a couple of threads there. So there's plenty of fluid going to come out. And I've got my fan, which is the top nozzle, all the way out. A nice wide fan. Now pay attention to the speed, the distance to the panel, and my overlap. Alright, so that's the first coat of base coat down, and it looks very even. Now, you're not trying to go for coverage on your first coat, you're just trying to go for evenness. So, definitely achieve that for a first coat. See a couple of the little dark spots there on the rub-through primer, but like I said, we're not going for coverage on the first coat. With my second coat, I'm pretty much going to do the same thing. I might just want to put it on a slightly little bit heavier, just to try and get that coverage now. So there's a couple of ways you can do that. You can either bring your gun closer to the panel, keeping the same overlap at the same speed, or you can slow your speed down and keep the same distance from the panel. So what should I do here? I'm probably just going to slow my stroke down a little bit. I like the distance that I have and I like my overlap. My fluid settings are all good. So I'm just going to go a little bit slower to get a little bit more product on the panel. so second coat down, and we've almost got coverage. A third coat is going to guarantee it, so I'm going to give it another full third coat before giving it its patent coat. At this stage, I like to give it another tack off. 2 coats of colour down and tacking it off now. I mean, if I've painted over any little particles, I may be able to pick them up with my tack rag now, as opposed to putting a third coat down and then really wetting those particles in and never being able to remove them. So now's a good time to do its first tack off during the base coat process, and then I'll do a final tack off after I do my patent coat before I clear coat. Okay, so this will be my third and final full coat of colour, and then I'm going to go to my patent coat. Alright, so third coat's down, and I'm pretty confident I've got coverage, but just to be sure, I'm going to get my light here and I'm going to have a look over, especially in those areas where there was that little bit of rub-through primer put down. Just want to make sure that that's not going to bleed back through. So I can't see any signs of any rub-through primer there. It looks fully covered. So now I'm going to proceed with my patent coat, and then from there it'll be the clear coat. With the patent coat, I'm just going to bring my gun a little bit higher off the panel, and I'm just going to turn the air pressure up a little bit. It's going to create a wider fan and make it a little bit more even. Clear coat. Now I do like to put my clear coat on a little heavier so I know it flows nicely. So I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to probably come a little bit closer to the panel, and I'm probably going to bring my overlap back, maybe just 10%. So instead of a 50-50 overlap, you might notice I'm doing more of a 60-40 overlap. That way it's just putting a little bit more product on the panel. So I've never really thought about my technique so much until I've really got to talk about it. It just comes second nature after many years of doing this. So it's interesting to me as to what I'm saying here and how I'm actually doing it. So yeah, watch this and we'll just see how it goes on as opposed to the base coat. after laying down my first coat, a little speck of something landed in the paint, and I'm trying to use my tweezers here to try and see if I can pick it out without doing too much damage. There you go, I got it. So the second coat of clear I'm going to put on nice and heavy. That'll drown out the tiny little, you can see there's just a tiny little pit where it was, but that'll drown it out and flow out nicely. I'd rather get that out now than clear over it, and then when I try to block that out, it'll just remain. It was a black thing, and there was no way I was going to get that out if I cleared over that again. Right, second and last coat of clear. I'm going to load this one up even heavier. Sometimes I do 3 coats, so a third coat's just like a flow coat, but I'm nailing this in 2 coats, so a little bit heavier, and it's just going to flow out lovely. Okay, so that's 2 coats of clear, laid down nice and even. You can see very dust free from taking those steps, just making that an absolute rule that you follow. You can get pretty dust free jobs. Now, there's probably a little tiny micro speck here or there, but nothing that a quick buff over is not going to remove. And you can see the area where I plucked that bit of crap out that fell in the paint after that first coat of clear. That's been cleared over and it's pretty much flowed out to nothing. So always a good idea if you can pluck a bit out before your final coat of clear without doing any further damage to do that. And the boot lid, very nice. The guard, had to redo this guard. I got a sweat drop on it yesterday when I was painting it. It was just a stinking hot Queensland day, summer day, and a bit of sweat came flying out of my sleeve and landed on the job somewhere around here, and that's completely fixed now. So, and the doors, beautiful, so straight. Yeah, it's all about the prep work, people. If you don't spend the time getting these panels blocked straight, gapped, getting the panels prepped for paint, you're never going to get a great job. So laying paint is only one very small part of the profession. All right, well that's it for this segment of restoration. I really appreciate you watching and following me. It really does go a long way, people. So thank you for following me and sharing, and hit that bell, and you're going to get the next video that I'm going to put up. It's going to be the whole restoration from start to finish. I'll edit it into a watchable segment so it's not too long, taking out a lot of these how-to segments. I like these small ones because I can actually show you with more detail of how I actually do things. But the full segment is going to be a start to finish where you'll see us completely transform the body that came in. So I look forward to seeing you then. Thanks again for watching.